The ocean has always been a battlefield. From ancient triremes clashing in the Mediterranean to nuclear submarines stalking the Cold War seas, great powers have always fought to dominate the waters. But in the 21st century, the enemy of the US Navy came from an unexpected place, not from rival nations like China or Russia, but from a cartel. This wasn't just another narco sub or speedboat. This was something entirely new. A floating fortress, engineered to defy the law, shield billions in drug trade, and project cartel power across oceans. The fortress was more than steel and weapons. It was a declaration: we will not be hunted. We will be the hunters. But what happens when a criminal empire challenges the might of the US Navy? What happens when a fortress at sea becomes a symbol of defiance? Today, we tell the story of Operation Iron Tide, a precision strike that turned the ocean into a battlefield and annihilated the cartel's so-called unsinkable stronghold. A mission that reshaped the war at sea and sent shockwaves across the globe. The cartel's fortress didn't appear overnight. It was years in the making. Intelligence later revealed how cartel engineers scouted abandoned offshore platforms in the Caribbean and Gulf of Mexico. These hulks, once vital for drilling oil, had become derelict structures rusting in international waters. To the cartel, they were opportunities. With bribed contractors, corrupt officials, and hired mercenaries, the cartel secretly acquired one such platform. Over the course of 2 years, it was transformed into a monstrosity: armored bulkheads, reinforced decks, concealed fuel tanks, and weapons platforms carved into its steel skeleton. Imagine an oil rig, but reimagined as a fortress. Containers became barracks. Pipes became concealed missile tubes. Radar dishes scavenged from black market arms deals stood like sentinels on its towers. But what truly terrified naval planners was its purpose. This was not a hideout. It was a command hub. A nerve center coordinating fleets of narco subs, fast attack boats, and cargo ships carrying billions in cocaine and weapons. The fortress became a refueling station, a drone launch pad, even a prison for hostages and defectors. Mercenaries patrolled its decks with military precision. They weren't just cartel enforcers, they were ex-special forces from Africa, Eastern Europe, and Latin America. Well-armed, well-trained, and ruthless. From this stronghold, the cartel declared its dominion over hundreds of miles of ocean. Shipping lanes, once controlled by nations, were now patrolled by criminals with enough firepower to rival small navies. It was, in every sense, a pirate kingdom reborn in modern times. And like the pirate havens of old, it was destined to be destroyed. When news of the fortress reached U.S. Southern Command, alarm bells rang across Washington. This wasn't just about narcotics anymore. If left unchecked, the fortress could become a precedent, a blueprint for cartels worldwide to carve out lawless zones at sea. The Pentagon convened high-level meetings. Intelligence briefings showed diagrams of the fortress, weapons caches, and command centers. Analysts warned that if allowed to stand, the fortress could even be leased to terrorists or hostile states as a staging ground. The Navy responded with a war plan unlike any it had used against non-state actors before. Codenamed Operation Iron Tide, it called for a full-spectrum strike: intelligence, cyber warfare, naval firepower, and special operations forces working in deadly harmony. The operation would roll out in 4 phases. Phase 1. Reconnaissance drones, satellites, and stealth submarines mapped every inch of the fortress. Sonar painted images of its underwater defenses. Spy satellites caught glimpses of mercenary patrols. Phase 2. Electronic warfare. The EA-18G Growlers, America's most advanced jamming aircraft, would blind the fortress, cutting off its ability to detect or communicate. Phase 3. Strikes from destroyers and submarines. Tomahawk missiles would rain down, guided to surgically destroy radar towers, weapons bays, and command centers. Phase 4. Boarding Navy SEALs would storm the fortress, seize intelligence, eliminate cartel leaders, and plant charges for total demolition. The risks were staggering. This wasn't a conventional battlefield. Collateral damage could spark international outrage. A failed strike could embolden cartels worldwide. And yet, the mission had to proceed. The Navy prepared its forces. Aircraft carriers positioned silently in the Caribbean. Submarines took up hunting positions beneath the waves. Drones circled in patterns invisible to radar. The world's most powerful navy was about to face the world's most audacious cartel. Darkness blanketed the sea. The fortress loomed like a shadow against the horizon. Inside, mercenaries drank coffee, scanning radar screens that suddenly flickered with static. They didn't know it yet, but their fortress was already blind. At exactly 3:15, the first Tomahawk missile launched. Its roar split the night sky, racing toward the platform with terrifying precision. A second missile followed, then a third. Seconds later, explosions tore through the fortress. Radar towers toppled, sending sparks and steel raining onto the decks. Antennas shattered like twigs. The mercenaries scrambled, firing blindly into the sky. Then came the jets. A-18 Super Hornets screamed in from the carrier strike group, unleashing guided bombs that detonated fuel tanks and weapons depots. Fireballs erupted, lighting the sea with orange fury. The Cartel fought back. Rockets streaked from shoulder launchers. Drones buzzed into the air like angry wasps. But U.S. Growler jets jammed their signals, sending drones spinning into the ocean. Rockets missed their marks, slamming harmlessly into waves. The fortress shook under relentless bombardment. Steel twisted. Fires raged. For 20 minutes, the sky was a canvas of fire, smoke, and death. But the assault wasn't over. This was only the opening act. The fortress was burning, but it was not defeated. Radar was down, towers destroyed, and yet, deep inside its steel labyrinth, hundreds of mercenaries remained entrenched, ready to fight to the last round. That's when the order came. Neptune teams, execute boarding. From the darkness of the sea, rigid hull boats cut across the waves like knives. Their engines muffled, their wakes barely visible under the moonlight. Inside, Navy SEALs sat in silence, weapons loaded, NVGs glowing an eerie green. Their comms crackled. All call signs, Iron Tide Phase 4. Expect heavy resistance. Targets high value. Capture if possible, eliminate if necessary. As the boats neared, the fortress roared back to life. Heavy machine guns mounted on the upper deck spat fire into the night, tracer rounds slicing red arcs over the water. Mortars thumped, dropping shells that sent columns of seawater into the air. The SEAL helmsmen weaved through the chaos. Miniguns mounted on their boats spun up, unleashing streams of lead that shredded enemy nests. Explosions lit the water as support destroyers fired precision naval guns, taking out the heaviest turrets. The SEALs closed in. Grappling hooks whistled through the air, clamping onto twisted steel. Lines went taut. Within seconds, operators scaled the fortress walls, rifles slung across their backs, climbing into the firestorm above. The breach began. One squad detonated charges at a service hatch. The blast echoed like thunder, spraying sparks into the night. Through the smoke, operators stormed inside, goggles scanning, weapons raised. The interior was a maze. Narrow corridors, leaking pipes, and echoing stairwells. The stench of fuel and burning oil filled the air. Every corner held danger. Mercenaries, desperate and cornered, turned the fortress into a kill house. Barricades of overturned steel, tripwires with grenades, improvised firing slits carved into walls. Room by room, the SEALs advanced. Room clear. One voice barked through comms. Frag out. Another shouted as a grenade clattered through a doorway, detonating with a flash that rocked the hull. The fighting was brutal. Close quarters combat. Doorways became choke points. Muzzle flashes lit the dark as mercenaries fired blindly. SEAL suppressors whispered death in return, their shots precise, calculated. By the 20-minute mark, they had secured the lower decks. By the 30th, the command tower was breached. Inside, cartel officers lay in surrender, their weapons discarded. On the floor, laptops, encrypted radios, and thick ledgers were hastily abandoned. But the fortress was still alive, fires spreading, secondary explosions shaking its steel bones. Time was running out. The SEAL commander's voice cut through comms. Priority 1 complete. Secure intel. Priority 2. Prepare charges. We're sinking this monster tonight. Demolition was not an afterthought. It was always the plan. The fortress was never meant to survive the night. SEAL engineers, trained in maritime sabotage, fanned out across the massive structure. Each carried rucksacks filled with C4 charges, detonators, and underwater explosives. Their mission: cripple the fortress beyond recovery. They planted charges at critical points. Support struts beneath the main platform, the skeleton holding the entire fortress upright. Fuel depots and pipelines, guaranteed to ignite secondary firestorms. Command spires, ensuring no radar or antenna would rise again. And deep in the hull, scuttling charges, designed to tear open chambers below the waterline, letting the ocean in. Every step was dangerous. Fires raged unchecked. Explosions shook catwalks, sending sparks cascading into the sea. Mercenaries, still resisting, ambushed demolition teams. Gunfire echoed down metal corridors. But the SEALs pressed on, covering each other, laying the charges with methodical precision. By 5:15, the fortress was rigged like a ticking time bomb. The SEAL commander keyed his radio, iron-tied demolition set, requesting extraction window in T-15. Above, helicopters thundered in. MH-60 Seahawks hovered, lowering ropes. SEALs climbed, hauling captured intel and hard drives strapped to their backs. Below them, the fortress groaned, its steel warped and smoking, ready to collapse. At a safe distance, the fleet waited. The countdown ticked down. 3, 2, 1, mark. The ocean erupted. Charges detonated in sequence. First the lower hull. Columns of water shot skyward as underwater blasts cracked open its foundation. Then the command tower, erupting in a fireball that toppled like a falling skyscraper. One by one, explosions rippled across the platform until the entire fortress was a chain reaction of fire and steel. At last, with a deafening groan, the structure gave way. Towers crumbled, catwalks snapped, flames consumed its skeleton as the ocean swallowed it whole. What was once the Cartel's unsinkable fortress became nothing more than twisted wreckage sinking into the abyss. The sea closed over it, leaving only smoke and oil slicks drifting in the dawn light. The destruction of the fortress sent shockwaves across the world. In the Americas, cartel networks scrambled. With their offshore hub gone, smuggling routes collapsed almost overnight. Ships without refueling stations turned back. Narco subs had nowhere to dock. Dozens of cartel leaders fled into hiding, terrified of suffering the same fate. News outlets across the globe broadcast footage of the fiery destruction. To some, it was proof of American dominance. To others, it was a warning of a darker trend, where cartels had grown so powerful that military-style operations were now required to contain them. But perhaps most significant was the intelligence haul. SEALs had recovered encrypted drives containing shipment routes, offshore bank accounts, and evidence of cartel ties with international arms dealers. That data sparked hundreds of follow-up raids across 3 continents, crippling networks that had operated unchecked for years. Politically, the mission was a statement. Washington declared that no ocean, no fortress, and no cartel could outmatch U.S. naval power. In Latin America, governments, long skeptical of U.S. intervention, found themselves reassured, and in some cases pressured, to align more closely with American maritime patrols. But beneath the triumph, there were shadows. Defense analysts debated, what comes next? If one cartel could build a fortress, others might innovate further. Floating drone carriers? Submersible bases hidden beneath waves? Hybrid fleets of mercenaries and AI-driven drones patrolling international waters? The line between criminals and navies had blurred. And for the U.S. Navy, the fortress's destruction was both a victory and a preview of future wars. The fortress is gone. Its towers shattered, its decks consumed by fire, its empire beneath the waves. But the story does not end here. History teaches us that every time one empire falls, another rises. The pirates of the Caribbean were once hunted into extinction, only to be reborn centuries later as cartel fleets and narco subs. So we must ask, will future oceans be ruled by warships or warlords? Imagine the cartels of tomorrow. Fleets of autonomous drone boats, swarm-attacking naval patrols. Submersible fortresses, invisible to satellites, hiding beneath shipping lanes. AI-driven logistics networks, moving billions across oceans without a single human on board. The fortress was a warning shot, a glimpse of a future where power is no longer held only by nations, but by empires of organized crime with wealth rivaling governments. For now, the U.S. Navy reigns supreme. Its message is clear. Build what you want, hide where you will. Our reach is global, our firepower absolute. But the war at sea is evolving. The next battlefield might not be a fortress. It might be an AI fleet, a drone armada, or an underwater city of steel and shadow. So we leave you with this question. Was Operation Iron Tide a final chapter, or just the prologue to a new age of naval warfare? Share your thoughts below. Could we see future cartels challenging the world's greatest navy again? Or has this decisive strike crushed their ambitions forever? Don't forget to like this video, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more deep dives into modern warfare and the untold stories of military power.